Today my topic is surgical management of surgical cancer patients during this COVID-19 pandemic that we are all aware of. Along with it, I would like to introduce a worldwide study done by the COVID Search and how to interpret the study and what we can do to help adding information in the study. Hello, my name is Dr. Mehnak Chakraborty. I am first year resident, senior resident in Department of Surgical Oncology, IMS. So going on, I will like to share you some of the latest breaking news that are happening in the surgical field or in the medical field. As we all know, just yesterday the news came that in Wockhardt Hospital, Mumbai, around 26 nurses and 3 doctors has subsequently tested positive COVID-19, and the entire hospital has been shut down and declared a containment zone. As we got the information that a cardiac surgery was done in the middle of March, where an asymptomatic COVID-19 patient was admitted. The surgery was done, admitted in ICU for 7 to 8 days, and he openly interacted with doctors and health workers. And after recovery, 5 to 6 days after recovery, he started showing symptoms and was tested positive. By that time, he has come in contact with many patients, many doctors who have came in contact with patients and sisters, and by now, around 30 cases have been found to be positive in only 2 wards. So the entire hospital has been shut down and declared a containment zone. Just today, a news has come in Delhi Hospital, in the Delhi State Cancer Institute, which is a 180-bedded state-sponsored hospital. Around 18 staff has been found to be positive in COVID-19, and as per the details, one of the senior residents in oncology department was tested positive in April 1st, and 3 days later, 3 more nurses tested positive in the disease, after which the OPD was shut down, and 48 of the inpatient cancer patients who were getting their chemotherapy, they all have been shifted to private hospital and been quarantined. A hot topic that has come, why surgeons don't want to operate right now. This is a very testing time for all the surgeons throughout the world, that they are saying as per the Italian study, as we can see, more than 50 doctors, as per study, more than 50 doctors who were in the front line has actually died because of this COVID-19. If we go into the details of this study, of this paper, I would like to highlight some of the points that has come out. People are discussing on this matter. Like, those on the front line are most at risk, not simply for catching the virus, but also getting it as a most severe form. The absence of adequate testing, including routine check of all patients, increases the chance that the doctor will fall ill. Operating rooms are sterilized environments. That's not any guarantee against infection. If a patient happens to have COVID-19, even if they are not showing any symptoms, the combination of powerful, high-velocity blood splatter ventilation system can produce a viral wind tunnel. If the theater has had any of the virus within it during the previous 72 hours, the airborne aerosol could have landed on some surface, including the ceiling. Protecting against that, even with stringent cleaning, is almost impossible. And according to recent Lancet article, the first pilot study that came out of human-to-human transmission was actually from in Wuhan, where infected before a surgery, almost a healthy person without any fever actually infected 14 healthcare workers. Even the COVID diagnosis was registered. If we go to this visual abstract that was published a few days back in Annals of Surgery by Brach G.A. et al., they have advised some of the protective measures for the surgical team during this COVID-19 outbreak. Like, surgical teams are at uniquely high risk for viral exposure. There should be proper structured communication between the members in the surgery before key events. Until proven otherwise, assume the entire operating room to be contaminated. A very vital point to be noted. Choose PPE effective against aerosols. Adapt techniques to reduce exposure to minimize the time of surgery. And another system they have started is a buddy system for donning and dropping. Like, 2 people should help each other while donning the PPE kit and help each other while dropping, that means taking out of the PPE kit. And as per the Surgical Gastroenterology Society of America and the European Endoscopic Society, they have also recommended some surgical response during this COVID-19 pandemic. According to them, the personal protection, there should be minimal number of theater staff and all staff should wear PPE. How to provide the service? Postpone all elective cases at present. Minimize face-to-face consultation and do virtual multidisciplinary team meetings. Laparoscopically, they say there is little evidence that minimal access surgery is having a very quick risk for COVID-19. They have just said there is proven benefit that a reduced length of stay and fewer complications. They have said the released CO2 insufficient gas should be filtered properly and to minimize the use of energy devices. And for all practical measures, they have asked to take additional COVID-19 consent from each patient that is operation. If possible, all patients should be tested prior to surgery, and there should be a dedicated operative room for the COVID-19 positive surgery to be done. And as per endoscopy, all staff should wear PPE and to avoid advanced procedure like EMR or ESD. If anyone can go to the details, there's Stages or IES website to fetch the full guidelines. I have just giving some pictorial abstract. And here I am presenting the gist from the paper that has recently been published in Annals of Internal Medicine, The War of Two Fronts, Cancer Care in the Time of COVID-19. Right? They have suggested during this COVID-19 pandemic, how to segregate or triage patients in low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. As per them, I'm reading the conclusion that they have said. As cancer care and COVID-19 are colliding, patients and providers will face extreme difficult choices. The combat plan during this battle must involve patient communication, diligence, and resolve. This must be balanced carefully, public health strategies implemented thoroughly, and resources should be utilized wisely. Furthermore, the policies and procedures developed today will serve as the basis for addressing the next outbreak of similar crisis. As per their study, they have found some surgeries can be considered to be safe. That means more than 3 months delay won't harm the patient. Among them, I am trying to show what are they are saying, like search for non-melanoma skin cancer or hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative, post-menopausal, non-locally advanced breast cancer, or prostate cancer, or type 1 endometrial cancer, or low-grade urothelial cancer, thyroid cancer, small renal mass, or even stage 1A1 cervical cancer. They are considered to be low-risk cancers where surgery can be delayed for more than 3 months. Intermediate risk, where the delay of 3 months is acceptable with some additional risk, like high-risk prostate cancer, colon cancer with low risk for imminent obstruction, stage 1A, 2 cervical cancer, induction, type 2 endometrial cancer, pancreatic mass suspicious for malignancy, or ovarian mass or liver mass suspicious for malignancy, muscle invasive urothelial cancer, anything more than type 1B kidney cancer, or anything more than stage 1B cervical cancer, as well as non-low-grade sarcoma. Consider waiting on results of inpatients who may be the last 2 points, like aerosol generating procedures increase risk to healthcare workers, but may not be avoidable. For patients who are or may be infected, aerosol generating procedures should only be performed while wearing full PPE, including an N95 mask, air purifying respirator that has been designed for the operating room. And there are currently insufficient data to recommend for or against an open versus laparoscopic approach. However, the surgical team should choose an approach that minimizes the overtime and maximizes safety for both patient and healthcare staff. And American College of Surgeons also released a triage guideline during the COVID-19 pandemic, like phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Like the hospital at what stage of this triage and what measures or what type of surgery should be performed. Like in phase 1, where in the semi-urgent setting, few COVID-19 positive cases, resources has not been exhausted. Institution still has some ICU ventilator capacity, and the trajectory is not in rapid escalation. Like this, you can consider like in India at present is in the phase 1 stage. Whereas phase 2 is the urgent setting, where many COVID-19 positive patients in hospital, ICU and ventilator capacity is limited, and operating room supplies are also limited, like at present in America. Whereas in phase 3, like hospital resources are all routed to COVID-19 patients, no ventilator or ICU capacity, operating room supplies exhausted, and patient in whom death is likely within hours if surgery is deferred. This is the situation in Europe. So according to this phase 1, 2, 3, they have for various types of cancers, they have advice for whom what type of surgery to be done in phase 1, what type of surgery can be done in phase 2, and what type of surgery can be done in phase 2. For phase 1, where likely to experience compromised survival if it is not performed within next few months. Those surgeries needs to be performed. Otherwise, rest all stage E2 or N1 with endocrine receptor positive but HER2 negative tumor, or patient with triple negative HER2 positive tumor, or discordant biopsies that are likely to be malignant, or removal of any recurrent lesions. Whereas these are for breast cancer. For phase 2, patients whose survival is threatened if not performed within next few days, like drainage, incision drainage of abscess or evacuation of hematoma, or revision of ischemic mastectomy flat, where reconstruction can be deferred. And phase 3 is for patients where survival is threatened if not done within few hours. Also very much similar, where the situation is much more safe, like incision of abscess drain, hematoma, or revision of ischemic mastectomy flat. Nothing more. No more surgery can be done in case of breast cancer in this phase 2 or phase 3. Similarly, for colorectal cancer, 3 months, few days, and few hours. What can be done for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3? For phase 1, those who are in nearly obstruction, colon cancer, rectal cancer, or cancer patients that require frequent transfusion, asymptomatic colon cancer, rectal cancer that do not respond to neoadjuvant chemoradiation, malignancy with a risk of local perforation and sepsis, and early stage rectal cancer that are not candidates for adjuvant therapy. They can be treated during phase 1. Phase 2, nearly obstructing colon cancer where stent is not an option, so diversion to be done, or cancer with high transfusion requirement, or cancer with pending evidence of local perforation and sepsis. They can be performed in phase 2. And in phase 3, only perforated, obstructed, or actively bleeding inpatients or those with sepsis, they can be operated. No more surgery can be done in phase 3. Similarly, they have given for thoracic cancer, where I would like to hurry up. I'm not going to go through most of the details, but they have given for phase 1 for the lung cancer, for phase 2 for esophageal cancer, they have given some of the criteria who can be performed in phase 1. For phase 2, non-septic perforation cancer of esophagus, whereas for phase 3, septic perforation or threatened airway, or surgical complication in unstable patients, like active bleeding or dehiscence of airway or anastomotic leak with sepsis. For the thoracic cancer surgeries that can be performed in these 3 phases. And for other cancers like gynecological cancer, only those cancers cannot be delayed, which can cause significant harm. That's they are saying all gynecological surgeries can be delayed. Delayed is not recommended for neurosurgery, which include brain cancer. In pediatrics, most cancer surgery is considered urgent. And for prostate cancer, they are not considered as aggressive. Most prognosis are not aggressive, but for those who are aggressive, androgen deprivation therapy can delay the start of radiation. And similarly, the Journal of American College of Surgeons have also proposed this similar level of risk and how to act during equal conditions. So that was an European and this was an American. So now I would like to introduce to a new topic, which is called COVID search. What is COVID search? As per we know, there is a University of Birmingham, Edinburgh, Warwick University. They have collaborated to give global data of surgery that is happening throughout the world, and to help the low and middle income countries to develop new strategies to fight or to learn together. So, of this global search group, they have started a new COVID search, that is the international cohort study, aiming to assess the outcome of surgery in patient diagnosed with COVID-19. Whereas COVID search cancer is the similar international cohort study, which is assessing the safety of surgery for cancer patients during this COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of this pandemic in cancer treatment. So what is the study design? It is the study design is outcome of elective cancer surgery during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, an international multi-center observational cohort study. Has been designed by international collaborating group of surgeons and anesthetists with representation from Canada, China, Germany, Hong Kong, Italy, Korea, Singapore, Spain, UK, and US. There is an urgent need to understand the outcome of COVID-19 infected patients who undergo surgery. Capturing real-world data and sharing international experience will support the management of this complex group of patients, improving their clinical care. And COVID Search will be a platform of collaborative global cohort studies aiming to explore the impact of COVID-19 in surgical patients, hospitals, and healthcare staff. So this is like you will get a real-world data every day. This data will be updated throughout the world, where each and every surgeon can participate, and they will give from now onwards. Since this is a proven pandemic, whatever surgery being done throughout the world will be considered to be done in this COVID-19 pandemic, and every data can be uploaded in this group. Whereas COVID Search Cancer is a separate study which will recruit all surgical cancer patients. Like either they could be COVID positive or COVID negative. Whereas the COVID Search cohort study will include patients undergoing any type of surgery who are COVID positive. As per Twitter, this has taken like a storm, and on April 3rd, they have updated that more than 220 patients had already been in the study. 307 centers have registered. And throughout the world, people are appreciating this study that is going on throughout the world. And every one of us has the ability to participate in this study. So why such study is required? Now, COVID-19 pandemic has crossed all international borders and has forced to redesign clinical service to deprioritize non-urgent surgical care. Hospital and health systems need to continue managing cancer patients, for whom a delay in treatment can lead to poorer outcomes. On the other side, maintaining treatment for cancer can put cancer patients at higher risk of post-operative complications due to the current pandemic. So, a high-quality updated data will allow policy planning at regional and hospital levels for both this outbreak and future pandemics. COVID Search Cancer will feedback regularly, with open access to short reports and summary data for all investigators. This will allow to optimize patient selection and perioperative process to maintain patient safety during this unprecedented period of uncertainty. Now, how to participate? Appropriate approvals and senior surgeon leadership according to the local regulation. Any center that performs elective cancer surgery and has been affected by COVID-19 is eligible for participation. Investigator may choose one or more cancer types from their center to upload the data. Study can be performed prospectively, retrospectively, or a mixed model depending on the phase of COVID-19 infection in the center. Study does not collect any patient identifiable information, and data will not be analyzed at hospital level. So anonymity will be maintained. What is the aim of the study? The primary aim is to evaluate 30-day COVID-19 infection rate in elective cancer surgery during COVID-19 pandemic. What are the secondary aims? 30-day post-operative mortality rate in cancer patients that develop COVID-19 infection versus those who does not. To explore the scale of resource constraints related to COVID-19 pandemic and their impact on outcome of elective cancer surgery. To explore variation in the selection of patients for continuing elective cancer surgery during the COVID-19 pandemic. To evaluate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on treatment pathways for cancer with a decision for surgery dissection with curative impact. Now, who can participate? Centers, any center performing elective cancer surgery are eligible for participation, like who are willing to do elective cancer surgeries during this phase. Centers will be certified according to their national burden of COVID-19 using data from WHO. And patients with a multidisciplinary team or tumor board decision for curative cancer surgery that have surgery completed during this phase, and patients that would have been planned for surgery, curative surgery by the tumor board in the pre-COVID era that have their surgery delayed or received an alternate treatment strategy during this pandemic. So what are the criteria for selection? All adults more than 80 years with a confirmed diagnosis of cancer patient can be included, and a tumor board decision for surgical management with a curative intent during this pre-COVID era. And who should not be included in the study? Like patient surgery planned with non-curative intent, like palliative surgery or emergency surgery being done should not be included in this criteria. And any planned neoadjuvant therapy without a firm date of surgery or awaiting restaging, these patients are not included in this criteria. These are some of the clinical scenarios. I will discuss one each, like which type of patients are being included and which type of patients are not being included. If you can see, a clinical scenario of colorectal cancer, a 58-year-old on immunosuppression with T3N1 disease, mid-rectal cancer. Change in operative plan on day of surgery in light of new surgical guidelines released during COVID-19 crisis. Reconsented and proceeded to open heart transplant. So this kind of patients are taken into consideration. For a clinical scenario for hepatobiliary pancreatic surgery, an 83-year-old male with severe several comorbidity and technically resectable pancreatic cancer. Initially, patient was fit for dissection. Case was re-evaluated and deemed high risk because of extended ICU stay and risk of patient of inpatient COVID-19 exposure. Therefore, surgery was cancelled and referred for palliative chemotherapy. This patient can be included in this study. And for a head neck case, 7-year-old male, type 2 with T2 squamous cell carcinoma, P16 positive, left tonsillar cancer. Pre-COVID, he could have been offered a primary chemoradiotherapy. Now, post-COVID, aiming to avoid chemotherapy, he is offered primary surgery. A chance there are case go to the site, understand better being studied, and how.
I think Mayank got disconnected. I think we have heard almost 90% of his presentation, except the conclusions that he could have drawn from the real world data. So we can open the discussion now. The first thing, I think most of us are not operating. So I'll give you my center's experience that we stopped operating. Basically, we stopped operating for two reasons. One is that we are short of supply because of lockdown. And the second thing that has occurred is that we are severely short of anesthetists because all the anesthetists have been put on the COVID duty. The second important thing is that we are also short of ventilators because the ICU has been labeled as the COVID ICU. And we are the premier institution and we have the highest number of the ventilatory support and the ICU beds. So in the preparedness, the government has virtually converted the ICU because 90% of the ventilators and ICU beds in Varanasi or in whole of the Eastern UP are actually in BHU. So if anything happens in the Eastern UP or even the adjoining Bihar, we are the only center which has the capacity to tackle the SARS patients. So that is one of the reasons that why the teams have been divided into 3 teams. One team works for 1 week, then they go for 14-day quarantine. The second team takes over, then that goes on 14-day quarantine, and so on and so forth. So all the physicians and all the anesthetists are actually in the COVID duty. General surgery people, ENT people, ophthal people are also in the COVID duty, except for the super specialities like surgical oncology, which is still running the OPDs. We are still running the OPDs. Apart from us, all other OPDs are also closed, and everybody has been advised to work from home. So now I'll ask Roshni that how is she handling it in US?
Yeah, so thank you. So a little bit of background. I'm at Columbia, New York Presbyterian in New York, the epicenter, if you will. So we have about 800 beds. Regularly, we have about 120 intensive care beds between the surgical ICU, the medical ICU, the cardiac ICU, and the neurosurgery ICU. All of those were taken over by COVID patients about a month ago. So subsequently, they've converted all of our cardiac beds, our cardiac ORs into ICU beds, about 4 patients per room. And so we went from about 30 OR rooms to now only 3 OR rooms that we're able to use. All the rest of them are ventilated ICU beds. So my background is surgical oncology. I've primarily done breast surgery. I'm now covering the ICU, as are almost everyone else. These patients typically have been on the ventilator for about 2 to 3 weeks. The other thing that we've noticed in just managing these patients, a lot of them end up with an acute tubular necrosis. So they go into renal failure. And we have enough ventilators for some time, but what we're struggling with at this point at Columbia are CVVHD. We're having to give a lot of CVVHD for these patients to try and manage their renal failure. They have to be sedated continuously. So we're having to give Versed, propofol, as well as paralytics, which are now coming to short supply as well. So those are the things that we're struggling with. As far as a cancer perspective, really the only cases that I've been able to get on, and the way that we do this is that we submit all of our cases across all the services to a committee. They go through the cases and they decide maybe about 2 or 3 cases every day that they're able to do. And the only cases that we're doing are the neoadjuvant window breast cancer patients, like the triple negatives and the HER2s that have had a great response. And some of the unusual cases, like I have a patient who's 26 weeks pregnant with a breast cancer that we're getting on the schedule. The other thing that was helpful, just as people prepare for this, is that our surgical residents are running what we call a SWAT team, which is every patient who gets intubated immediately gets a central line. They're using their left IJs because they're saving their, and then it's just a matter of watching them for 2 or 3 weeks until they get better.
So Rudra, what is your take? What are you doing at Max?
We don't do any elective surgery, absolutely no. Only emergencies like colonic obstruction, small intestinal obstruction due to malignancy, and some elective cases like neoadjuvant has been given, and this is the window period they have got. Otherwise, they will lose the window period, like some one rectum, one esophagus, but very less. In the last 2 weeks, hardly we operated 4 cases. Tomorrow, I am doing a lung actually, so which is 3 centimeter size lower lobe. So all these are very minimal. Otherwise, our load is quite high. But we are 5 persons in the department. So we only 1 person comes to the department by rotation on the 5th day, and he's off for 4 days. So that is the schedule we follow. And because the advantage in Delhi is till now no private hospital has been taken for COVID treatment. LNJP and GBPAN, they are totally 1500 bed. Rajiv Gandhi super facility 800 bed. So 2500 RML Safdarjung all combined. They have made 2500 beds COVID hospital in the government facility. So the private hospital have isolation wards of 10 beds, 12 beds like that, but still they have not been touched upon in most of the hospitals. So because they have identified pure COVID hospitals, so a similar way in Max, Saket and Patparganj has been, Saket one wing and Patparganj has been identified as COVID hospital. So there the other services will shift to other hospitals in Baisali and Shalimar Bagh. So there will be pure COVID and non-COVID hospitals. We don't intermingle the patients. So that is a big advantage.
Dr. Arnab?
Sir, I am there, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
What is your take? What are you doing these days?
I am doing the same, sir. Our whole hospital and the unfortunate part is my anesthesia HOD has been contacted COVID, sir. And he has been diagnosed after good about 7 or 8 days, where I myself have operated 2 OTs. So I was sent on quarantine for 14 days, and we all 15 surgeons and doctors. Fortunate enough that everybody of us tested negative. and we are back again to work from today onwards. So we are not doing anything for breast cancer patient TFR positive. I'm putting them on oral hormone therapy, and triple negative patient, I really don't know what to do. Luckily, I have not faced one. I have a question to you and Rudra sir both. Sir, what to do with because I faced with this dilemma this morning only. I've got a right lower alveolus on an aged lady. This is a T4 disease. What to do? Now I have sent her to my medical oncologist for a neoadjuvant chemotherapy. Then again, it's between the choice between the devil and the deep sea. I need your opinion, sir.
Arnab, I'll say T4 lower alveolus is something where you can wait, because especially the tumors which are located anteriorly, even if they perforate through the skin, they will still be operable. So you may end up making a T4A, T4A, chances of making it a T4B or inoperable is rare in tumors which are located anteriorly. Retromolar trigon, yes. If it is operable, it should be operated, because if you wait in a retromolar trigon, it will go to the masticator space, it will go to the infratemporal fossa, and it will become inoperable. But if it is an anterior lesion or a lateralized lesion, I think you can very safely wait. There is not much of a problem with alveolus.
Arnab, you are from which institute?
Sir, I am with the Command Hospital, Calcutta, sir.
Arnab is from Army.
No, I know. So the what we are following is that whenever you have such a case where you are thinking that we should operate, we are asking our medical superintendent to allow for a COVID testing. Although it is not 100% proof, there are false negative, but we ask for a COVID testing, plus whether it is positive or negative, we practice universal precaution with the PPEs. 5 kits are provided per surgery, and only 5 people are allowed inside the OT. Nobody else is allowed to go in or out. All people are with the PPE. We think like a HIV positive case, and we operate with the minimum duration without doing any microvascular. Only we do local flap and finish off. Because last week my head and neck surgeon did one command also, but after a COVID test plus universal precaution, we are following both of them.
Yeah, Anshika is here from Dehradun, and we would like to hear about what she is doing in Himalayan Institute.
Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Anshika. I'm working in surgical oncology in CRI Dehradun. In fact, I had a question, sir, regarding any special consent that needs to be taken during this time while you operate on a patient you have to operate.
Yes, Anshika, you have to take a special consent. And this is the recommendation of the both American College of Surgeons as well as European surgeon, that this should be done. The reason for this is that if the patient contracts COVID in the hospital, he is liable to sue you. So you sue you or the hospital. So you have to take a special consent, inform them that there is a possibility, whatever least the possibility is, that they may contract the COVID. And if they contract the COVID, the prognosis may be altered. Then
so are we all going ahead with that consent right
now? We are not operating, Anshika. We are operating only emergencies.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure, Rudra.
Sir, please. Because we are running a OPD, in the OPD also there is a consent form. Before you see the patient has to sign that he's during the COVID period, because of emergency, he is showing in the OPD. Otherwise, all consults are video consults. So that is number one. So we have in the OPD, there is a form for the COVID, even the patients are non-COVID, everybody has to sign that. Then yes, only the patient is seen physically, number one. Because you might do a oral examination, you might do anything. Later on, if the patient becomes positive, he might sue you. That is number one. Number two, for the OT also, there is a separate consent. If you pass on the mobile number, I can send both the consent forms, OPD and the OT.
That will be excellent, sir.
It is actually mandatory. It is mandatory. And the second thing is that if you're operating, you have to also explain to the patient the availability or non-availability of a ICU or a ventilator in case it is required.
Correct.
Because if a complication happens during the surgery, whether you will be able to take the patient on a ventilator or not, even that has to be very clearly specified. This is mandatory.
Sir, any take on oral metronomic chemotherapy in the meantime?
Methotrexates.
Yes. That's right. I was.
Arnab, methotrexate works wonderfully well in oral cancer.
Sir.
It works wonderfully well in oral cancer.
Sir.
So if you want to buy time, methotrexate is a good drug, but the only problem with methotrexate is that you get a lot of oral ulcers, and within 2 weeks of starting methotrexate, your patients will be having difficulty in eating. And irrespective of how much folic acid,
bone marrow suppression also.
Bone marrow suppression occurs, but the doses which we use is something like 5 milligram or 10 milligram daily, which are low doses. If you use a high dose like 50 milligram, then it is even much more a problem. But more bigger problem is that folate metabolism is inhibited. So anemia occurs and the whole of the oral mucosa get ulcerated. So you may be required to give a leucovorin rescue. That is one of the problems with methotrexate. Endoxon is used. We use it a lot. Rashmi will not agree with me, for breast cancers, which are metastatic, where we have exhausted all our resources. We just put them on oral endoxon, 100 milligram daily. And these patients, some of them do wonderfully well. They live for longer time than expensive drugs, which has a low median survival. And I had a patient of breast cancer, metastatic, who lived for 3 years on oral endoxon. And I have another patient of endometrial stromal tumors, which was metastatic, that I put on oral endoxon. She lived for 7 years. So we have patients who have been on metronomics and doing wonderfully well. But that it doesn't work in all the patients. So, and the complication rates are high. Like for the period of endoxon, there will be no hairs. Everybody will lose hairs. Then MSS is another problem that you have to consider. And in the COVID time, any drug that actually reduces the your total leukocyte count or causes neutropenia is a dangerous drug to give, or a dangerous combination to give. So that is what you have to remember, that even if you're using a chemotherapy, make sure that it is not a high dose chemotherapy or a dose dense chemotherapy or any chemotherapy that will produce recurrent neutropenias.
I'd like to also know from Samir sir, Colonel Samir Gupta, our HOD in Pune, about his experience. Samir sir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Arnab, I'm there. Good evening.
Yeah, your experience, sir. Because you are heading one of the oldest and biggest MDTC of
FMC Pune. Yeah.
Sir.
See, I feel that cancer treatment in the time of COVID should be managed by a multidisciplinary team. It cannot be managed alone by the surgical oncologist. All decisions should be made by a multidisciplinary team where the treatment is decided and consented to by all. That is the most important point I would like to stress. Secondly, in our center, what we are doing is that we have stopped, as everywhere else, all elective surgeries. We are only doing emergency surgery, but the window period, like for recently, I had to operate on a patient with carcinoma breast post neoadjuvant chemotherapy. So we are going ahead with such patients. But coming to patients who, like I have got a patient with skin cancer, squamous cell skin cancer in the inguinal region. Now, I don't know what to do with such a patient. So these are the ethical dilemmas which we are confronted with every day. So I would like to know the opinion of the House on such cases also.
I think, Samir, your hospital is not a COVID hospital.
So we have made a entire hospital as a COVID hospital. Part of
Okay.
the hospital has been converted into a COVID hospital, though we
And-
have not yet received any COVID patients.
And how is the supply of the PPEs?
The supply of PPEs, as is everywhere else, is limited.
Yeah, so
It's the
that
same
is
here,
our
same
problem.
here.
That is our problem also, because starting an elective surgery is easier, but we have to ration our PPEs. That's one of the most important. And the people who are fighting COVID, they have the first preference on the PPEs. So because of the lockdown, getting the supplies is becoming more and more difficult. And like after 2 weeks, today we got the testing kits and some of the PPEs which were brought in by a special Air India flight. So this is how the things are reaching us, and that is why it is more important that we don't know when the next lot is going to reach. So you don't want to exhaust what you already have in your hand, and that is why we are trying to reduce as much as possible the use of PPEs where it is not required.
Another point which Dr. Rudra mentioned, that you have to treat each patient as if he or she is COVID positive. But even after the surgery, once the patient is sent to the ICU or to the ward, the requirement of PPE doesn't stop, or it doesn't end. So
Exactly.
that point also has
Exactly.
to be considered. Yes.
Exactly. And I just heard the news that today NRS Medical College in Kolkata has also been, I think, shut
Yes.
down.
Yes, sir.
55 people
Yes,
have
sir.
been sent to quarantine.
Yes, sir.
So this is the third hospital, I think. So we have Wockhardt Hospital in Mumbai, Cancer Hospital in Delhi, and then NRS Hospital in Kolkata, where there had been a mass COVID spread and the hospitals has to be shut down.
Fourth one is Jaslok already.
Jaslok already, yeah.
Already.
So 4 hospitals has already been shut down.
And Gangaram partially.
Gangaram partially.
Gangaram, more than 200 people are in quarantine.
Yeah. So now hospitals after hospitals, the COVID outbreak is taking place. And every time there is an outbreak, the hospital has to be closed. The whole thing has to be sanitized. So it is a time where it is better to be safe and be cautious rather than try to venture out and do.
Correct.
Because it is not only the surgery, sir. Post-surgery care is also a matter.
Exactly.
I have a question for the group. One of the things that we just started doing yesterday was all of our patients who are coming in for surgery are now getting tested. Has anyone started doing testing of asymptomatic healthcare workers? Like, I can't get a test even if I really wanted one, but I didn't know if that was starting to inculcate the healthcare community there.
Dr. Sumohan has told us a very good experience from UK yesterday. Manoj sir will agree with me.
Yeah.
They were doing a NCCT test to see that if there is bilateral opacity suggestive of COVID. If there is not, then they are going, and NHS has taken over all the private hospitals where they are preferentially doing the cancer surgery. I don't know. Sir will be able to tell.
Yeah, but to answer Rashmi's question, I think
It's different.
It's different because at present we are not doing any asymptomatic screening, not for health workers and not for anybody else. The guidelines for screening is very strict that either it started with people with history of travel, people who came in contact with the people of history of travel. Then it included the symptomatic people. And as of today, only when there is a cough, fever, or a difficulty in breathing, only then a COVID sample is taken. The number of testings which has been done is not much. I think 100,000 or odd testings has been done so far in the country. and the emphasis slowly is moving into antibody testings now, which can be done easily and can be done at mass scale. So probably in the population, what we are going to offer in days to come will be a antibody screening rather than a PCR screening.
So asymptomatic healthcare worker, nobody is at present. This is not part of the testing protocol of the
Yes.
ICMR. But if somebody is exposed to a positive patient, then let us say in our ICU, one patient was admitted from 1st March, but he had bilateral pneumonia, septicemia, then one ventilator. On 21st or 22nd, ICMR came with the indication that all patients with pneumonia should be having a COVID testing. We did the COVID test, and the COVID test came positive. So there were pulmonology team and the sisters and the all the persons in the ICU. Everybody was tested and sent for 14 days quarantine. So they were around maybe say 30 or 40 of them. So in that, healthcare workers exposed to positive patients only they are doing, but without asymptomatic, without any positive patient being exposed, nobody is doing for the healthcare workers. Maybe as Manoj told, from Friday they are getting the kits for antibody testing. So from Friday they are getting more than 1 lakh kits for Delhi only. So I think the healthcare workers, they may start doing it because of this multiple hospital becoming hotspots. They are now focusing that all hospitals should be screened after some point of time.
Yeah,
And
because
that antibody test that they're starting on Friday is validated. They know that.
Validated, yes.
Yeah, it is validated.
Yes,
it has a 98% sensitivity.
98%
and
sensitivity, and the lab is from Bangalore, and the cost is also quite cheap
low.
actually.
But Roshni, the main reason for doing an antibody testing is that corona is a new virus. Nobody has been exposed to it. And hence, it is the population prevalence of IgG and IgM should be negligible or nil. So anybody who is found to have a antibody to the new coronavirus should be positive only if he is exposed.
But I think there's a very large group of asymptomatic carriers, and I think a lot of those folks may be healthcare workers. I think that's what a lot of people are concerned about here because it spread so rapidly and quickly. So that's where the antibody testing is helpful. We don't have it yet here.
Yeah, but I think ICMR has approved this test, and I think they will not be submitting it to FDA. But this is something which people can look for, that this antibody test is actually 98% sensitive. And the cross reactivity with older viruses is very little in this new coronavirus. This is a kind of a different virus. And they say that if you have an antibody, you have been exposed.